Next matchup, Georgia Tech at the University of Georgia, 12 o'clock Eastern kickoff on Saturday. The Georgia Bulldogs are minus 35 in Athens, totals 49. Now, I'll tell you what, I got to imagine that Georgia will call off the Dogs early in this game with the SEC championship just a week away. There's no doubt they're going to win this one. They're going to take care of business and get the job done. But there is no need to leave the starters in any longer than you have to. When it comes to covering the number, the Bulldogs really aren't invincible when it comes to covering the point spread. They actually failed to cover recently against the likes of Kentucky, Florida, and Missouri. So like I said, feels like a 31-0 game or a 33-3 game. You know what I mean? They're going to blast these guys, but I think they're going to call off the Dogs. There's no reason getting your guys hurt, especially playing Georgia Tech. These guys can't move the football. Actually, if you think about it, when it comes to covering, Georgia Tech actually does a nice job of covering on the road. The Yellow Jackets are 4-1 against the spread while traveling, and they're led by Ayinde Ely, who's got 170 tackles. Man, let's just pause real quick. All right, we're making the case for the Georgia Bulldogs to win this game, but they haven't been great covering the number. Georgia Tech, they can cover. They've shown they have the ability to cover, and defensively, they're led by Ely. He has 107 tackles on the year. So I just wanted to get that point across because I'm fumbling my words here. All right. Now let's go ahead and move on. Charlie Thomas. He's a teammate of Ayinde Ely. He's right behind him with 104 tackles on the season. When it comes to the injury report, quarterback Jeff Sims, he is still out for Georgia Tech. So don't look for these guys to, light up the scoreboard here. Now, for Georgia on the other side, the Bulldogs, Nyland Green, Adonai Mitchell, and C.J. Washington, they're listed as questionable for them. Now, weather-wise, should be a wet and sloppy one by game time. So I'd look for these offenses to maybe struggle a little bit. Might have a tough time securing the ball if it stays rainy. When it comes to the total, Georgia's gone 4-1 to the under in Athens this year. Meanwhile, Georgia Tech, they went 73% to the under for the whole year. Like I said, this feels like a 31-0 game, 33-3, ugly score. But I think Georgia Tech can keep it within 35. So give me the Ramblin' Wreck plus 35, under 49. Next ball game, Michigan, Ohio State, 12 o'clock East. Ohio State's -8, totals 57. And speaking of the total, we've seen a ton of overs in these teams' recent meetings. 9 out of these teams' last 10 contests went over the line. Meanwhile, this year, Ohio State saw 5 out of their last 7 in Columbus get over the number themselves. Now, when it comes to selecting a winner in this one, unfortunately, this is another one of those games I'm betting on personally, so I cannot give you a freebie on this one. But if you want to see who I'm betting on, I will include a link to my college football tier package bets on my website in the description section below. But as far as making a free pick is concerned, I am going to lean toward the over 57 in that game. Next matchup, South Carolina at Clemson, 12 o'clock Eastern start time. Clemson is -14 at home, totals 50.5. And even though the Gamecocks are riding high after beating Tennessee, this could be a dangerous letdown spot for the South Carolina faithful. They're facing a Clemson team who's quietly gone 10-1 this year, and they haven't lost a game in Death Valley. They're also doing a terrific job running the football at home. Will Shipley's got almost 1,000 yards on the year, and he scored 13 times on the ground. Now, Clemson's going up against a South Carolina defense who has a tough time slowing down the run themselves. These guys are in the bottom 10 in rush defense on the road. They're also giving up 31 points a game in their travels. Now, injury-wise, Christian Beal-Smith and Marshawn Lloyd, they're listed as questionable for South Carolina. Meanwhile, for Clemson on the other side, Thomas, Breesy, Davis, Pace, and Collins, they're all listed as questionable for them. Now, when it comes to the weather, could be some slop. We have a 50% chance of rain expected at kickoff. Chance of slop, but I wouldn't really say it would affect this game much in terms of ground game for the Tigers. They protect the ball well. At least they've shown at times they can. And I just don't think they're going to cough it up all over the place, even if it gets rainy. Now, total-wise, Clemson went 6-3 to the over in their last 9. Meanwhile, South Carolina saw 5 out of their last 8 get over the number themselves. Pretty chalky lean here, but I'm going to lean toward Clemson, -14, over 50.5. Next ball game, West Virginia at Oklahoma State, 12 o'clock East. The Oklahoma State Cowboys are -8.5, total 66. And even though the Cowboys have struggled, I think they can roll here on Saturday at home. They're undefeated thus far at Boone Pickens Stadium. They're also in the top 15 in passing on their own field. Spencer Sanders has thrown for over 2,600 yards and 17 touchdowns. Now they're facing a West Virginia squad who lost 4 out of their last 5. And they have just one win this year on the road. And one of West Virginia's biggest problems has been their secondary. They're allowing just way too many yards a game away from home. I got no numbers for you. They give up a lot of yards. Now, injury-wise, James Miter is questionable for the Mountaineers. Meanwhile, for Oklahoma State, Lacey Harper, Hutton, Ford, Green, and Rangel, they're all listed as questionable for them. When it comes to the weather, small chance of showers by game time, 48 degrees as well. I don't think the rain is going to immensely impact this game. Now, total-wise, the Cowboys are 4-2 to the over in their own stadium. Meanwhile, Dub VU saw overs against the likes of Kansas State, TCU, and Baylor. Give me Oklahoma State, -8.5, over 66. Next game, Army, UMass, 12 o'clock East. The Army Black Knights are -20 on the road, totals 45. And even though I really hate this number here, the Black Knights have been covering machines down the home stretch. They're 4-0 ATS since October 22nd, and they're rushing for over 300 yards a game. That should come as no shock. They run the ball 1,000,000 times a game. Now they're facing a UMass team who's got one of the worst rush defenses in the country. This is really a recipe for disaster. These guys are currently 103rd in slowing down the run. When it comes to offensive production, the Minutemen are scoring fewer points a game than every other team in the nation except for Colorado State. Now, injury-wise, Rico Arnold, Devin Baldwin, Jermaine Johnson, and Tim Baldwin, they're all listed as questionable for UMass. Meanwhile, for Army, Cade Ballard and Tyrell Robinson are questionable for them. Really doesn't matter with Army, though. It's just next guy up. Your backup's going to perform just as well at the quarterback position or running back position at Army than the starter. Total-wise, slight chance of rain, 50 degrees in Amherst. When it comes to the total, the Minutemen went 70% to the under in their last 10. Meanwhile, Army saw unders against the likes of Troy, Air Force, and Wake Forest. I'm going to lean toward Army, -20, under 45 in that tight window. Feels like a 28-7 game. Next matchup, New Mexico State at Liberty, 12 o'clock East. The Liberty Flames are -23.5, totals 51. Now, the Flames should get back on track here. They lost 2 straight after upsetting Arkansas, so they were kind of on a high and really thought their ish didn't stink. So I think they're now back to reality. They're also tough to move the ball against in Lynchburg. They got a great defense. These guys are in the top 15 in fewest points allowed at home. Robert Rahimi, he has a team best 5 interceptions from the secondary, 45 tackles for the safety as well. Meanwhile, Darrell Johnson and Dennis Osagidi, man, that's a tough one. But they combined for 14 sacks between the two of them. They're facing a New Mexico State team who really struggles offensively. They're in the bottom 3 in road scoring, and they're throwing for under 145 yards a game. Now, injury-wise for Liberty, Brum, Monday, Ogle, Lofton, Seegers, and Brunson are questionable. When it comes to the weather, 51 degrees and a slight chance of rain by kickoff. When it comes to the total, New Mexico State saw unders versus UMass, New Mexico, and Florida International. Meanwhile, Liberty saw all of their home games this year stay under the total themselves. I'm going to lean toward Liberty, -23.5, under 51. Next ball game, Big Ten, Rutgers at Maryland, 12 o'clock East. Now, the Maryland Terrapins are minus 14.5, totals 49. And following a strong performance against Ohio State, a loss, the Terps may have to go to work without starting quarterback Taulia Tagovailoa. He suffered a tough injury to his leg at the end of that game on that Ohio State scoop and score. A tough way to lose the game. And I'll tell you what, for a team laying this many points in a conference game, the Terps really haven't been great against the number this year. They failed to cover in 5 out of their last 6. Now they're facing a Rutgers team who plays some pretty physical defense despite their record. They don't back down. I mean, the Scarlet Knights, they've done a nice job slowing down the pass. These guys actually have a top 25 pass defense. Christian Isian and Deion Jennings, they have 150 tackles between the two of them. When it comes to the injury report, Keyshawn Abraham, Josh Youngblood, Vic Konopka, and Peter Longerbeam, they're questionable to play. Meanwhile, for Maryland on the other side, Chalon Famatu and Taulia Tagovailoa, they're listed as questionable for them. Now, when it comes to the weather, slight chance of a shower in 53 degrees by kickoff. When it comes to scoring, Maryland saw 5 out of their last 9 stay under the line. Meanwhile, Rutgers saw unders versus the likes of Minnesota, Indiana, and Nebraska. I'm going to lean toward Rutgers plus 14.5, under 49. Next ball game, it is going to be Coastal. That's Coastal Carolina at James Madison, 12 o'clock Eastern start time. JMU is minus 14, totals 54. Now, the reason why this number is so high is because Coastal Carolina's Grayson McCall is out with a foot injury. Having said that, though, it's been this Coastal rushing attack that's given teams problems. They're in the top 20 in road rushing, and they've done a real nice job in time of possession. The Chants are in the top 15 in the country in offensive time of possession. When it comes to defensive play, well, the Chanticleers are allowing just 19 points a game when they travel. JT Killen, he's leading the charge with 83 tackles along with 3 fumble recoveries. They're facing a JMU squad who's had a tough time covering the point spread here lately. They're just 1-4 ATS in their last 5. And during that span I just mentioned, this James Madison defense allowed over 36 points a game throwing out that ODU contest. Now, weather-wise, chance of a shower in Harrisonburg, 48 degrees by game time. Comes to the scoring, JMU saw unders against the likes of Old Dominion, Louisville, and Marshall. Meanwhile, Coastal Carolina went 4-2 to the under in their last 6. I'm going to lean toward Coastal. I'm going to lean toward Coastal, plus 14, under 54. Next matchup, Old Dominion at South Alabama, 12 o'clock East. Now, South Alabama, or as I like to call them, Sala, they're minus 15.5, totals 48. Now, the red-hot Sala Jaguars won their last 4 straight, and they've lost only 2 games all year. They also have one of the toughest rush defenses in college football. They're allowing only 88. I'm sorry. Let's rewind. They're allowing 86 yards a game on the ground, along with just 19 points per contest. Jaden Voisin and Trey Kaiser, they have over 130 tackles between the both of them. And of course, Yan Banks, he's 4th in the nation in interceptions with 5 of them. And they're facing an ODU squad who really stinks at running the football themselves. They're in the bottom 10 in the country in rush yards per game. They're also averaging less than 20 points per contest. Now, weather-wise, 40% chance of rain and 64 degrees at start time. When it comes to the total, South Alabama saw unders against the likes of Arkansas State, Troy, and Louisiana. Meanwhile, Old Dominion 73% to the under for the entire year themselves. I'm going to lean towards South Alabama, minus 15.5, under 48. I just saw something. It didn't fly past the screen in front of me. I actually saw it in the TV screen behind me. It looked like an orb. I don't know. Maybe somebody's trying to talk to me from the other side. Anyway, moving on. Georgia State, Marshall, 12 o'clock East. Marshall is minus 6, totals 47.5. Now, this feels like a pretty good number for Marshall backers here. They run the ball fairly well, and they're actually going up against one of the worst rushing defenses in the Sun Belt. Georgia State's allowing over 215 yards a game on the road. rushing. Meanwhile, offensively, the Panthers can certainly run it themselves, make no mistake about that, but they are little to no threat throwing the football. They're throwing for just about $1.15 a game on the road, and this is certainly a Marshall defense who you don't want to be one-dimensional against. They will expose you. The Herd's giving up only 15 points a game, and they're in the top 10 in the country in fewest total yards allowed. Now, Micah Abraham's got 5 picks on the year. He's actually 4th in the country in that category. There's a bunch of guys who are tied for 4th in the country with 5 interceptions. And, of course, Owen Porter and Sam Burton, they've combined for over a dozen sacks between the both of them. Now, injury-wise, Talik Keaton and Isaiah Norman, they are questionable for the Herd. When it comes to the weather, 50% chance of rain in Huntington by kickoff. Now, total-wise, Marshall's 9-2 to the under for the entire season. Meanwhile, Georgia State saw 4 out of their last 7 stay under the total themselves. I'm going to lean toward Marshall -6, under 47.5. Next ball game, Western Kentucky at Florida International, 12 o'clock Eastern start time. WKU's -7 on the road, total 61. Now, I actually do like this number for Western Kentucky backers here. They're in the top 3 in the country in road scoring, and they're throwing for nearly 350 yards a game in their travels. Now, Austin Reed, he's thrown for over 3,800 yards this year, along with 33 touchdowns. And, of course, wideout Malachi Corley, he's a 1,000-yard receiver this year. But it's not just all offense in Western Kentucky, by the way. These guys are in the top 15 in defensive yards per play on the road. Really playing some tough D. They're facing a Florida Atlantic team who has little interest in throwing the football. These guys are in the bottom 20 in home passing. And if the Hilltoppers want to run the football for a change, well, FAU's defense has had a tough time slowing down the rushing attack. Now, weather-wise, beautiful, hot Saturday afternoon in Boca Raton, 84 degrees by game time. When it comes to the number, all 5 of the Owls' home games this year did stay under the line. Meanwhile, Western Kentucky somehow has gone 67% to the under for the whole year. I'm going to lean toward WKU -7, under 61. Next matchup, ECU taking on Temple, 1 o'clock East. The East Carolina Pirates are -13 on the road, totals 51. And even though ECU's got some players, this feels like a bit of a trap here. They lost their last 2 straight, and they've had a tough time with Temple in recent history. They lost 6 out of their last 9 meetings with the Owls, and they're allowing a bunch of yards per play on defense. Pirates are currently 93rd in the nation in yards allowed per play on the road. Now, I get it, guys. Temple's not particularly an offensive juggernaut. I think probably guys like me and you could play quarterback for him. I don't know. But keeping that in mind, there has to be something said for their secondary, okay? This Temple secondary is leading the nation right now in defensive passing at home. They're giving up fewer yards a game through the air at home than any other team in the country. Leighton Jordan is in the top 10 in the country right now with 9 sacks, along with a couple of pick sixes and a scoop and score. Meanwhile, Darian Varner is also right behind him with 7.5 sacks on the year. So this is a team with a pretty tough pass rush. When it comes to covering, Temple's 5-1 against the spread at the Link this year. By the way, they play at Lincoln Financial Field. That's the Eagles' home stadium. Now, injury-wise, Ahmad Anderson, DeJuan Mathis, and Ian Stewart, they're questionable for Temple. When it comes to the weather, looks like partly cloudy and 52 degrees in South Philly on Saturday. Now, total-wise, Temple saw unders against the likes of Cincinnati, Tulsa, and Memphis. Meanwhile, ECU saw 5 out of their last 8 stay under the total themselves. I'm going to lean toward Temple +13, under 51. Next ball game, Kent State at Buffalo, 1 o'clock Eastern start time. Buffalo's the 4-point favorite at home, totals 53. Despite a rough couple of weeks, the Bulls are still one of the better covering teams in the country. They're 7-3 against the spread in their last 10. They've done a nice job dominating time of possession. They're actually in the top 5 in the nation in total offensive plays per game. When it comes to defensive performance, Marcus Fuqua has 5 interceptions out of the secondary, along with a pair of fumble recoveries. Of Of course, teammate linebacker Sean Dolak, he has a team best 109 tackles. Now they're facing a Kent State team who failed to cover in 6 out of their last 7, and they have one of the worst secondaries in college football. These guys are actually in the bottom 10 in defending the pass. Now, injury-wise, Nico Bolden, Dante Cephas, and Colin Schlee, they're all listed as questionable for the Golden Flashes. When it comes to the weather report, no real surprise here. 50% chance of rain in upstate New York, although keep in mind it can always snow on the drop of a dime. If you're betting on any games in upstate New York, always got to keep an eye on that weather report, especially near Buffalo. But once again, total-wise, Kent State 80% to the under in their last 10. Buffalo unders against the likes of UMass, Bowling Green, and Miami, Ohio. I'm going to lean toward Buffalo -4, under 53. Next game, Akron, Northern Illinois, 1:30 p.m. East. And I use -10 at home, totals 54. And despite being the double-digit fave, NIU's yet to cover a football game on their home field yet. They've also played horrible defense in front of their own fans. The Huskies are allowing 38 points a game on their own campus. They're facing an Akron squad who does a nice job covering the number themselves. These guys are 5-2 against the spread in their last 7. And they have one of the best names in college football at receiver. Of course, I'm referring to Shocky Jock Louis. He's got nearly 1,500 receiving yards combined with teammate Alex Adams. Love that name, Shocky Jock. Now keep an eye on starting quarterback DJ Irons. He is currently listed as questionable, a little bit banged up. So if you're firing on this game, I don't know why, but if you're betting on this game, keep an eye on his status. When it comes to the weather, mostly sunny, 45 degrees in DeKalb, Illinois. When it comes to the total, NIU saw all 5 of their contests at Husky Stadium get over the line. Meanwhile, Akron saw overs against the likes of Eastern Michigan, Ohio, and Bowling Green. I'm going to lean toward Akron +10 over 54. Next ball game, Rice, North Texas, 2 o'clock East. North Texas is -14, total 60.5. Now, North Texas has been a mean green covering machine. They're 6-1 against the spread in their last 7. And they've done a superb job running the football. Now, that saying I just said sounded really corny, but it's even cornier if you know the name of North Texas. Their nickname is the Mean Green. So that pun, even worse. Very corny. But anyway, the Mean Green, they're in the top 3 in home rushing. And they're led by Ayo Adeyi, who's averaging 8 yards a carry. Meanwhile, quarterback Austin Awney is in the top 25 in the country in passing yards. And he's thrown 29 TD passes. Now they're facing a Rice defense who allows 41 points a game when they travel. And even though this is a big number, the Owls failed to cover in 4 out of their last 5. Now weather-wise, 53 degrees and cloudy by game time in Denton. When it comes to the total, the Mean Greens 4-1 to the under in their last 5 at home. Meanwhile, Rice has gone 73% to the over. Oh, I'm sorry. Total-wise, North Texas 4-1 to the over in their last 5 at home. Rice 73% to the over for the whole year. Give me North Texas -14 over 60.5. Next ball game, Louisville, Kentucky, 3 o'clock East. Kentucky's -3.5, totals 43. Now, luckily for UK, they're going to have to face a banged-up Malik Cunningham, if he even plays. The star quarterback for Louisville, he has a bad shoulder right now, and he's questionable to play. And even when he is healthy, well, the Cards have a losing record on the road, and they failed to cover in 3 out of their last 5 while traveling. Now they're facing a tough, physical UK defense who allows only 19 points a game. No real surprise here, guys. The Cats are in the top 20 in fewest yards allowed. Derek Jackson and DeAndre Square, they've combined for over 110 tackles on the year. When it comes to the weather report, possible shower and 53 degrees by kickoff. Now, total-wise, the Cats saw all of their games this season stay under the total except for 1. Meanwhile, Louisville went 4-1 to the under in their last 5. I'm going to lean toward Kentucky -3.5, under 43. With that, guys, We're going to jump into our next and final matchup for the video. It is going to be Troy at Arkansas State, 3 o'clock Eastern start time. Troy's the 14-point favorite, totals 46. Now, the Trojans should be able to throw it all over Arkansas State. The Red Wolves are 102nd in the country in stopping the pass. Meanwhile, the Trojans are doing a nice job throwing the football on the road. Tez and Ray J. Johnson, they've combined for over 1,100 receiving yards between the two of them. Meanwhile, as a team, the Trojans have won their last 8 straight, and they held their opponents to 17 points or less 7 times during that span. TJ Jackson and Richard Jabuner, they've combined for 13 sacks between the two of them. When it comes to the injury report, Jaden McDonald, Luis Medina, and Caleb Ransall, they're all listed as questionable for Troy. Now, when it comes to the weather, chance of rain in Jonesboro, looking around 45% chance, so could see a shower. When it comes to the total, Arkansas State's 4-1 to the over in front of their own crowd. Meanwhile, Troy saw overs against the likes of UL Monroe, Western Kentucky, and Appalachian State. I'm going to lean toward Troy, minus 14, over 46.